Shrink-wrapped, shelved, and uniformly faced, I wonder why we taste of panic, trauma trafficked and packaged in a square that's 80% air. Like the creatures at Nim, I'm becoming aware that I'm a Kellogg or a Lay, built fragile to waste away unless transformed by magic sugars. Sweet, sugary science, just to the taste of the giants. Additives plenty, taste profile mapped. All of us branded, red-handed, shrink-wrapped.
Bravo, Aaron. Has
Thank
that
you.
poem evolved since you last performed it for me?
You mean yesterday?
Yes.
No.
No. I guess I was tired. So there's there's a couple sentences that I forgot and I liked.
Yeah, I woke up like the amateur poet that I am, really, really excited about the pun shrink-wrapped, as in, prepackaged, soulless, commoditized, and also reliant on therapists. And I understand it's kind of a negative poem, and I know that in our education series we've already talked a lot about standardization, and this is pretty much just an anti-standardization poem. So I thought we should start the episode with the most positive thing, which is our kids' place.
I love it.
That was kind of the extent of the prompt that I guess we came up for ourselves. Design a place for kids in the Solacene that is educational, that isn't a school, and presumably isn't a home.
Or a library.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So last week we designed the Solacene Gymnasium inspired by the Greek Gymnasium. And so this question was born out of that. What about a space for kids? Because the Solacene Gymnasium is for 18 plus, presumably.
Yes.
So where do the kids go while the parents are at the gym?
Right.
And they're going to go to this place. So I know that you were really puffing up your kids' place. You said, my kids' place is going to be way better than yours, Alicia.
I did say that, yes.
You said, you're actually going to make a fool of yourself, Alicia, when you try.
I didn't go that hard on it.
So lay it on me.
The floor is mine.
Floor is yours.
So, okay. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I've always been very inspired by this quote that Kanye gave on a podcast. Kanye West.
Kanye West, okay.
That actually now is just named Ye.
Yeah.
But I think if I'd said that, maybe our demographic wouldn't have understood who I was referring to. But, and he said that, well, if we want people to stay off the internet so much and video games and engage more in the real world, we have to make the real world as cool as video games. And I think there's no demographic for whom that's truer than children, because they're the ones who are like, why would I want to go and pound the pavement when I could be playing some Fortnite or, whatever. So when I was thinking of a place for kids that is wholesome, social, and also educational, I was trying to take some of the tenets of video games, as in the funness. So mine is called the Labyrinth of Learning.
Cool.
That's the place. I don't know if you can see on my paper, but I originally had it called the Labyrinth of Wisdom.
Okay.
But then I remembered that a couple of weeks ago, I designed Wisdom Park.
Yes.
So I didn't want the branding to get confused in the Solacene educational infrastructure.
Okay.
So the Labyrinth of Learning. And the tagline is a real-life video game.
Neat.
Just from that name, do you want to cast some assertions, some guesses? What do you think it's going to be like?
I'm picturing the maze in Harry Potter where they're trying to get to the cup in the center, but along the way there's some spiders, there's some spooky things, there's some challenges, there's some intellectual challenges. So that's my guess.
That was certainly one inspiration. Another one, also Harry Potter, was... Actually, I don't think you've gotten to this in the books yet, so I don't know if I should spoil it for you.
Spoiler alert, okay.
But the book's been out for like 14 years now, so
yeah,
it's too late. But the Ravenclaw common room, the Ravenclaw being the house for all the smart kids, the way that you get into it is by answering a riddle.
Okay.
And don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of the riddles, there is no right answer. So your answer just has to demonstrate original thought, essentially, which I love that idea.
That's lovely.
And especially on the theme of today, which is kind of how do we promote original thought in children, this could be a labyrinth that is pretty much as you described. It's a race to get to the center. I was also thinking about like escape rooms or a corn maze, but that's very seasonal, which I don't like. But it's based around knowledge. So maybe there's riddles, maybe there's math questions. One little scenario I had was that you have to reach the middle to find, say, a dictionary. And the dictionary enables you to get out of the maze, which is what you're ultimately trying to do.
Okay.
Because the way out might be blocked by difficult or obscure words.
Okay.
So the dictionary will teach you these words on your way out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of like a magic, what's it called? Magic school bus episode, I think.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like that.
Cool.
Meanwhile, you're being chased by a minotaur.
Okay.
Who could be a person obviously dressed up as a minotaur.
Mm-hmm.
But if he gets you, game's over.
Okay.
So this is also kind of classically inspired. And it's teaching kids about the myth as they're reenacting it.
Mm-hmm.
And the minotaur, the way that you kind of defeat him is every time he confronts you, you have to rhyme at him with original poetry.
Mm.
And that will slow him for a while.
Okay.
He's still relentless, so you have to be on your toes the whole time. So it teaches you to kind of think under pressure, to think as a team, because I think it'll be a group-based exercise,
Mm-hmm.
and to rhyme, which I think is great.
Yeah.
There could also be like a sphinx who
Mm-hmm.
offers you weapons and food. No, they're not real weapons, but
This feels intense.
it's like a foam sword or something.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to correctly answer the riddles.
Okay.
There could be things on the walls, clues, or there could be questions about other languages or math or geography. I thought could be really good because the whole thing is kind of an exercise in spatial reasoning and navigation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also inspired a little bit by the dungeons in the Zelda franchise,
Mm-hmm.
because something I've always thought about those is that they're actually quite educational, and they require you to navigate space in a way that so often we genuinely aren't in the real world anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's funny because in a video game where everything is obviously pre-mapped and predetermined, you can be more lost than you can be in the real world, when usually there's signs everywhere and you've got a map at your fingertips and things like this. What do you think about this? Would you like to partake in this?
I would. I like escape rooms. I've never really done an official one, only really small scale ones. So I like that this is a lot more physical. I feel like a lot of the escape rooms are very intellectual, simple progression. There's not many ways that you could go wrong.
Exactly. That's what I like about a maze, because it's practically infinite, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the soft skills that a labyrinth teaches you, like memory, logic, and navigation, are things that kind of have slipped through the cracks in not just education system, but the world in general. I mean, we tried to do a maze last autumn or so, and I consider us pretty good at thinking on our feet and quite a good team.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure it was a maze designed mostly for children.
Yes.
But we struggled, genuinely.
Yeah, we had this map and you had to find different points and get stamps.
It's true, we were given a map.
Yeah.
And we still
got
struggled.
lost. Yes, but we made it, and it was certainly an adventure. You were looking up, there's like reference points of like a silo in the distance or a barn in the distance. Like, okay, to orient yourself. It was definitely a rewarding experience, and I liked that.
But I think those are muscles that don't often get exercised. And I think for children, because there's so many different ways you could approach it, like there's nothing to stop them from just making a map as they go, or leaving markers. The Minotaur, that's why I kind of mentioned that. There's all these different ways that you could go about it. And I think also it's proven that when you're under pressure, you will remember something more, right? Like that will form memories. So those words from a dictionary, maybe if they weren't being chased by a Minotaur, they wouldn't remember them. But then every time after that, they had like...
cytoplasm.
Yeah, cytoplasm or like vermilion, they would know.
They would. So let me just make sure that I'm getting this straight.
Yes.
Monday nights is the 7-Year-Old Labyrinth.
Okay.
So all the 7-year-olds go.
Sure.
And they try and get to this labyrinth.
Well, what I like about it is that there's so many different ways it can be set up, it can be changed. It could be by age group like that, or it could be competitive. You could have like 4 people against each other or something.
Okay.
And it's also very easily changeable. Like one thing that I find with a lot of other educational centers, like science buildings, you know what I'm talking about, or like museums for children.
Yeah, they're always the same. You go
almost
back.
Always the same, right? There'll be like a new exhibit or 2 every year. But this one, there's nothing to stop it from changing every week or every night.
Yeah, I like that. So my children's center was just a children's gymnasium. And I know it's lame because I took it literally when we were piggybacking off of last week. But I had a few fun ideas. Yeah. One, I spend a lot of time at parks, you may have noticed. And one thing I always notice with the playgrounds is that they have ages on them. So it's like 0 to 5. But they have stages, which I think is cool. So I think at this children's gymnasium, there'll be playgrounds much smaller age range. So it's like, okay, you can literally just unleash your 1-year-old on this and they're not going to hurt themselves, with really high sides, but still the staged kind of, okay, I've conquered this first stage, I'm going to move up. Because I feel like kids really like that. And it allows them to be creative. I just think playgrounds are incredibly beneficial. Think about how many times, like, your neighborhood and my neighborhood had like 2 playgrounds maybe. And you'd go there sometimes multiple times a day because it's the only place to go when you're a kid. But you'd come up with so many different games, so many different ways to use it. Yeah. And I think that's really great for kids. So I just imagined a lot of jungle gyms. It
gives kids the resources, and then they can do whatever they want with it. Like, talking about infinitely replayable, like, sorry to sound too much like an indoor kid, but the idea of playgrounds there's so many different levels of it. It's like Mario, right? Where if it's kind of like an open world platformer where there's multiple ways that they can figure out how to climb it. And even once they have solved it and they're good at climbing it, they can all get together and play grounders or something even more creative than that.
Yeah, exactly. So I pictured kids, just a lot of playgrounds, because I feel like you learn a lot about space and yourself, and creativity is really enacted on playgrounds. And the next thing I thought that the kids' gymnasium would have would be a stage, but not just a stage with a lot of props and materials and things that they could use to put on productions of any sort. So, did you have like a tickle trunk growing up?
A what?
A tickle trunk?
No, I don't know what that is.
A tickle trunk is basically a box of clothes, but like dress-up clothes.
Okay.
And so we had like the same one my entire life. So Halloween would roll around and you say, oh, what's in the tickle trunk? Obviously the same thing as last year, but then you get to kind of use it in a new way. And then you're playing dress up. Oh, me and my sisters used to always make like movies. So using those materials in really fun ways. And I think it would build independence because, ripped this. You can't just leave it ripped in the gymnasium. You have to fix it or work together with your fellow children to fix it. And so I just thought kind of like this almost, to kids, seemingly infinite supply of resources that they could use to do fun things with. And then that leads me into the art studio, which I think should exist, because what kid doesn't love a bunch of paints? You love a bunch of paints.
It's true. I mean, I like to consider myself the modern Van Gogh.
You do, yes.
But my issue is that so many of my paintings, I mean, people don't understand them. I think because the colors tend to blend into a brownish
hue
mix. Yes. Yeah.
So people can't wrap their head around the fact that those colors were once
distinct. So what I like to do is blend them all together in pursuit of a higher shade. But
ultimately,
I'm not appreciating my time, that's for sure.
So I think this kid's art studio, I'm also picturing this gymnasium with no adults. So like, kids can just kind of govern themselves, which is another part of it.
Unsoup.
Obviously, like I do want there to be kids of all ages. So it's like, obviously, we can't just unleash all the 18-month-olds into one space. But perhaps it could be a bit more community taking care of one another, because I was inspired by the community we live in. There's like 12-year-olds pushing babies in strollers, holding hands with like 6-year-olds. And it's like, what on earth? Because that doesn't happen most other places. But it's like, it's a really tight-knit community, it seems. And like the kids all kind of take care of each other, which is neat. And I was kind of inspired by that. So I'm not exactly sure how the adult supervision will go. There'll probably be like the stage, maybe you'll have to be like 8 or older and so on. But the art studio, I pictured there'd be some of the like community elders working there. Kids can watch, kids can ask questions and so on. And I also think there should be an international center. So like in the Solacene, things are going to be like super localized, but I imagine there'll be a lot of connections kind of intentionally with surrounding communities, surrounding countries, provinces, whatever the government structure is wherever in the world. So I just picture there being these places where kids can kind of go to learn about other community centers that are existing around the world. So maybe they work with, in this community center we're doing a virtual meetup. And
I was thinking about having something like that, some kind of permanent, and having it be between these official centers is a good idea. some kind of permanent room where there's just a big wall.
Mm-hmm.
There's just one giant Zoom meeting or something.
Yeah, like I don't exactly know what it is.
Like a UN, but for kids.
Yeah.
And via Zoom.
I don't know exactly how it would work, but like maybe there's like a weekly workshop that, okay, the kids at this center are going to put it on and then it's going to be aired over here and so on, teaching each other a recipe, teaching each other, or even just like recapping, kind of like pen pals.
Exactly like that.
Yeah, so, because I don't want, like with the small communities, I don't want everyone to be isolated and unconnected because that doesn't build empathy. But I think this is a good way to keep connected. And then, I went on an exchange here. I'm going to start a program with this country I went to or this province I went to. Yeah, so that, and a couple more things. As I said, the kids' governance, but also like a model UN sort of situation. I feel like kids need the opportunity to practice debate skills and practice rhetoric and all those fun things. And I think a little model UN would be fun.
When I hear kids' governance, I think of in recess where the kindergartners lived in their little segregated, penned off corner of the playground. And they were just like the most tribal type of society you could imagine.
Yeah.
Led by violence.
Yeah.
But so you say this is just everyone from 0 to 18.
Yeah.
What do you envision like the 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids doing?
Yeah. So I think a couple more things that will be involved is kitchens and gardens and what else did I have? Lectures, gymnastics, martial arts, just like all the things that kids do nowadays, like, I have martial arts practice, I have ballet class, but all kind of localized and uniform, like all kind of coordinated so that parents don't have to drop people off all over the world or all over the city.
No,
it's like
that's
just bring them to this area.
It sounds like a very big building.
Well, I pictured it being like acres and acres. One other thing that I forgot to mention, which was crucial, is the Forbidden Forest.
Ooh.
That would be here. There's going to be this mythos that's been like kind of built over time. Like it's obviously going to be safe. Like we're not going to just have like actual minotaurs running around.
Okay.
Or lions. But there's, this part is really spooky. Just kind of a fun, just like a lot of space that's safe. And it's like, supervised, but like the adults aren't intervening. If there's a conflict between the kids, like it's a good opportunity to work it out. And so the older kids I think would be doing a bit of instruction in all of these activities, but also just kind of exploration. They could go to the art classes themselves. They could be leveling up in whatever martial art they choose. They could be cooking in the kitchen. Again, there'd be some like adults around they could be learning from.
Could be some kind of badge system like in the guides.
Yeah,
or the Girl
something
Scouts.
like that.
One of the ideas I had before I settled on the Labyrinth was basically a mall without shops. So I was like, that sounds a little bit like what you're doing, except instead of shops, that's the dojo,
activities,
that's the kitchen, that's the paint room, something like that. Because one of weirdly a strong memory I have is when we were going around a mall and it was mostly just a regular mall with shops, but then there was this one empty or almost empty shop room place that was just completely open, no people in there. They just had 2 ping pong tables. You could just play. And we were absolutely shocked because I'd never seen anything like that before. But I thought it was brilliant. And of course, we played some ping pong. And that's kind of the atmosphere that I feel.
That's what I'm picturing.
For your place.
Yeah, a bit less like harsh lighting. Like obviously it'd be a very Solacene design, very natural and breathable. But I do picture, okay, I'm going to go to the gymnasium, Mom. See you later.
You have a name for it?
No.
What about the kidnasium?
Perfect.
He does it again.
How does he do it? Anyway.
Oh.
Speaking of painting and lessons, I wanted to paint this week's organism of the week, which is the flax. Show it to Aaron, show it to people watching on YouTube.
That's lovely. I would like to act surprised, but you didn't do a very good job of hiding it today.
Because it had to dry and we live in the same apartment. So basically the flax and the image that I drew, it's a very stocky, fibrous plant, but then the actual flax seeds that we all know and love come from the flowers once they go to seed, and that's what you harvest and use.
I do like eating flax seeds.
Love eating flax, love linen. Big linen guy.
Well, you are.
I am, yeah. So flax are cool because they're just like a flowering plant. They're just like flowers. but then their little seeds are so useful and they have so many omega-3s. And I learned that there's 2 types of flax seeds, which are pretty much the same nutritionally, but the golden flax have a bit more omega-3, and then the normal flax, like the brown flax seeds, are a little bit less omega-3. It's still good for you.
Yeah.
And they're also used to make linseed oil. You've heard of that? Textiles and an animal feed.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned that too many flax seeds can be toxic unless they're boiled. So it's like, don't eat like a bag of flax at one time unless you've boiled them.
I don't know who's going to do that.
Not me.
There's also a great song. I think it's a piano song. I think it's by Debussy called Girl with the Flaxen Hair.
Cool.
Recommend
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah, and the flax flower, which I didn't really realize what it looked like, is my favorite color of blue, which I was trying very hard to emulate in this image. None of them landed on it.
Let's see it again.
So the blue that the flax seed is, or the flax flower, is, like early in the morning when the sky is just starting to become blue.
Okay.
So it's not like sky blue, but it's like blue. It's that color. Kind of a dark, but at the same time light blue. Hard to explain.
Sounds like you really like this flower.
I do. They're really pretty.
Also, let me know that I almost guessed that even before I saw the painting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I said, I'm going to guess your organism of the week. I said it's going to be some kind of tropical plant.
Mm-hmm.
And the flax definitely grows in warm places.
Temperate places.
So I was very close.
Okay. Yeah.
I knew it would be a plant. I was just feeling...
Well, I'm feeling very summery.
Mm-hmm.
And I love flowers. I love flax.
On that note, teaching people to think.
Yeah.
I
thought of this organism of the week.
Yeah, and who taught you how to think like that?
I don't know.
So the question was, in the vein of last week's, how do we teach people how to speak?
Mm-hmm.
How do we teach people how to think?
Yes.
Because free thought is the seed of free speech.
Mm-hmm.
And I came up with 3 categories. Or three methods, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of a crossover with the last section of today's episode, which is about educational philosophies. Because, of course, the educational philosophies that we prefer or prioritize, especially when we're designing Solacene in our heads, is just naturally going to be the ones that produce good thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
But the first kind of state or prerequisite that I think is necessary to teach thought is boredom.
I was going to say that too. That was my guess.
No.
I wrote it down and everything. But it's like, you're bored, you need to literally think of a way to occupy yourself.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be bored.
It's true.
Let the kids be bored.
I had a little example, which was something that occupied me from, let's say, age 9 to 12 or 13 a lot, was these little comics that I used to draw. You know them?
Grass Boy.
Grass Boy comics. Grass Boy was the name of the superhero. Each was 2 pages of printer paper, so it's like four sides, really. And there was a cast of recurring characters, heroes and villains. It was kind of a superhero. I guess it was the MCU
It was
before
really
it was
the
the MCU.
prerequisite to the MCU.
Yeah. I should be seeking some money from them, but especially, well, I don't want to talk about the villain, but but the reason I mention this is because I distinctly remember when I came up with the idea for Grass Boy, not that it was a great idea or anything, but it was something that occupied me for a long time and did help give me things to do, especially in school, which was often quite boring. It was just a summer day and I was watching TV, and it was one of those days when you're watching TV and you're like, it was when you kind of, as a child, it's like you kind of zone out watching shows that you don't like or care about, but then you kind of come to, and you wake up and you're like, wait, what am I doing? And it's been 3 hours.
Yeah.
And right beside the television was the window, and I looked outside, and do you know what was on the ground?
Grass.
A lot of it.
A lot of grass.
And then it just snapped like that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in this example, it was the mindlessly numbing state of daytime television that produced a sense of boredom in me. But we could skip the TV step and just get bored and just do nothing. And then it encourages creativity and also contemplation. And contemplation is just a really great thing. And what I like about creativity is because what it also provides, not just along with like the work that you're creating, is a bunch of problems and a bunch of issues. So for instance, when I'm making the comics, it's like, oh, I want to draw this guy, but I don't have the right color. so maybe I'm going to blend these two other things, or I want to write about this, but I don't know about it, so I'm going to research into this a little bit. I don't know how to bind these. I don't know, how to organize them. Oh, how are other comics distributed or labeled or anything like that? So creativity, what I like about it is that it's pretty much just a series of troubleshooting in pursuit of the original vision.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you want to do anything, it's like, for example, which you're probably sick and tired of hearing about, these pants that I made that I'm wearing.
Yeah.
But I had never sewn something from a pattern, really. Like, I've always used kind of freehand patterns. So doing this and having to follow all the instructions, it says, okay, there's this type of stitch you need. So I need to go down a rabbit hole and learn about this stitch and how to do it and so on. Oh, there's this technique you need to use, and then you have to go. And then by the time I created a single pair of pants, I learned a bunch of new things about sewing and about fabrics and about like the way that textiles work. Because, for example, I was putting in the waistband, and then I was like, why did it stretch? Like, I measured it correctly. Then I had to learn all about that. So now the next time I make a pair of pants or a shirt, I know so much more, and I'm sure that will then inspire me to learn a bunch of new things. And all of this came out of like just one single task, make a pair of pants, then you learn a bunch of stuff.
It's still a creative task, but it's a very educational creative task. And another good thing about boredom, I think, is that it helps you, or rather it inspires you, along with misery, its cousin. It inspires you to try to think of ways to improve the world, either by alleviating your boredom. So for instance, there's a YouTuber, this just came to me, but there's a YouTuber that we used to watch called Casey Neistat, right? And he, or maybe it was his friend, were always talking about how on the subway in New York, it would be nice if maybe when you looked out the window, there'd be like an array of images, right? That like caused a film kind of when you looked at it. Like when you flip through one of those books, a flip book, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Because they were bored looking out the window.
Yeah.
So like instances like that, it's like misery and boredom help you think of ways to change the circumstances so they don't produce misery and boredom, and thus the world is gradually improved.
Yeah, I think that's what brought us to today, though, where we can constantly watch TV because someone was like, oh, I'm bored, what would fix this? A box that shows you a bunch of images.
No, I mean, that's why we need to like manually enforce these things on us. And that's actually a thing that I think can be a future function of schools. This can just be a place enforced without technology or the internet. Because homes are never really going to be that, because that's on the parents, and the parents are never going to, like uniformly, parents won't impose such harsh restrictions on their kids. But schools can actually be that place that encourage boredom. Sounds so funny, but...
Yeah, but I mean, like, obviously not the whole day.
No,
I don't want kids going to school and being bored.
But study hall, I think, is a great idea.
Exactly. One thing that I thought of that kind of goes along with that is that we need to stop being so accustomed to being always given the answers, always able to access the answers. So it does go with not having access to the internet all of the time. But, I'm in this class and I have this question for this project that I'm doing. I can't Google it, so you have to try and brainstorm a way to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. And then when you do come up with an answer, even if it's bad, you're then going to remember the proper response to that situation or the way to fix that problem, even if you don't manifest it out of nowhere. Even if you try something, doesn't work, you have to ask a teacher, ask a friend, or Google it. You're going to remember the answer a lot more than if you hadn't tried first and you just Googled it.
Yeah, I had that note too, which was basically just presenting students with hard or sometimes even deliberately impossible questions.
Yeah, for sure.
This kind of goes along with my last note, which was great art/literature, because I think most great art, one way of conceptualizing is that it is just a hard problem. When you're, let's say you're first confronted with a Monet painting and you're absolutely compelled to stare at it, part of the problem or the questions that ask you is, why am I so compelled by this? So that's like something to solve or to figure out by staring at it and learning about it and things. And there's the formal elements, which is, wow, what is it about the construction of this painting visually that's so compelling? And there's also maybe the thematic element, which is, what's this trying to say about life that I can learn? And I think both of those are great things for kids to ponder. I mean, it can never be a bad thing for children to come out of their education with a really strong sense of design. I think that would be really beneficial to the world. And also if they're, if they've been instructed by all the great painters and writers and musicians of the last 1,000 years, and that's a pretty good education. So great art and literature from a young age, I think.
Yeah, I agree. My final thoughts are that kids need to be exposed, and adults as well, to good thinkers throughout history, people who asked good questions, people who changed systems, because if you're never exposed, so you're presented the history of Martin Luther King Jr. and you're just exposed to kind of the outcome of the situation, then it's you're going to learn who he was, what he did. But if you're listening to his speeches, maybe reading about his entire history, you're going to kind of see along the way where he came to conclusions and came to the right questions to ask and the right ways to come up with answers to those questions, I suppose. And just people who asked right questions that change systems, so that kids can then learn to ask questions and change systems.
Yeah, that's why I think biographies are really cool.
Yeah.
We always talk about how it would be a great thing for schools to offer classes just about a person, and learning in depth that person and how they operated, how they thought. Mm-hmm. I agree. And it doesn't also have to be someone who's just honorable or just good. It could be someone who's a little bit more gray. I think that might be more interesting, depending on the age of the kids, obviously.
Yeah. The final thing I had was philosophy from a young age. I didn't get exposed to philosophy until I was at a university level, and I think that was not beneficial to me. I think had I had the language to communicate because we have this innate tendency to have philosophical thoughts. Kids from a young age are asking, why is the sky blue? Why do people do this? And so it's when you give really artificial answers, oh, it's just when you don't give the in-depth answers to kids, I think it's selling them short and then not giving them the language to fully express their questions and their feelings and their experiences. So I think, just philosophy from a young age gives them the language to think and be better thinkers.
I agree about that, but I would reword it so that it's not the case that parents or instructors should give answers to kids. Yeah. Because a lot of the questions there aren't answers to, and that's what makes them so great. But definitely giving them the resources, the vocabulary, the references and the knowledge to come up with their own answers would be really cool. And I had that as well, which was philosophical questions, scientific unknowns. Yeah. If it was something what do you think antimatter is? To a 13-year-old. They don't know what antimatter is because most high-level scientists don't fully know what antimatter is. Yeah. But it lets them think about it and start researching it and using their imagination, and that's a great thing. And along these lines, I was thinking either words or books or concepts which the students aren't fully comfortable with. We have this ideal ratio of things that we know to things that we don't know. And when we're in a subject like that, that's the best way that we can grow, right? When they say, as a kid, when you're trying to find a book which matches your reading level, they're read a page, and if there's, say, 5 to 10 words that you don't know, that's a good amount. Pick that book because that's a little bit more than what you know, and then you'll learn that, which I think is great. But sometimes I think it can be really beneficial to read a book that has 40% words you don't know. Basically, I'm talking about topics like that. Yeah. That can be helpful. I think it can be helpful in small doses so that it doesn't discourage everyone. But I think if not discouraging, but sometimes do that. Yeah, but if it was from a young age, you're going to be less discouraged because the way that it's going now, it's for years and years, you're never challenged. And then when you reach your first challenge, you're well. Yeah, we don't know how to face it. We don't know how to think. Yeah. And my final point just on the great art/literature is that the way that art challenges your views is really good, because I think maybe the key tenet of a good thinker is that they rethink a lot. There's this quote which was, the best thinking is rethinking, meaning they can change their mind a lot. And it doesn't mean they're flaky, but it just means they're open. And I think so often as we get older, our views, our opinions, our thoughts on things, even when confronted with pretty concrete and really inarguable evidence to the contrary, they just get more solidified. We hear a lot about this politically. And I think that if we teach kids from a young age to be more flexible to opposing views or other theories, and to be constantly learning, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah, it's crucial.
And one final thought I had to mention, a film education. In the same way that since literature was for so many years the dominant form of storytelling and art on the mass scale, that English class was full of a canon of books. I think today, since film is more popular than literature, I don't think it should completely replace books, because I love books in school and I think books are amazing. But I do think there should be a presence for great films and the beginning of a canon like there has been with literature for so long.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point. I wonder if it's happening at all, because I remember we watched a few films in school, but I do think that's crucial, because I never appreciated film until I started learning about film history on my own time and from you. And then now it's like I can watch a film that would be traditionally like, oh, that's just like schlock, that's just like whatever. You can watch it and be like, as bad as this was, it had these artistic merits, and this is where it went wrong, this is where it could have been better.
Exactly.
And it enhances, I find, your experience of watching all movies. Because I used to only like when I first started getting into film, I was like, I only liked like The Shape of Water and those like really, really filmy films that were like groundbreaking. But now I can appreciate
Nacho Libre.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is, I'm telling you, it has some really prestige cinematography, but not just blockbuster movies, but the whole medium of video has been democratized in the same way that literature was. You know, there was a time when it was like everyone's writing poetry. Now it's like everyone's making movies, but we don't get the same kind of education about it. So,
yeah, I think that's important.
So yeah.
Two really good speakers here. This is my most favorite topic in education, which is educational philosophy. So I wanted to do the series, and this is our second last episode.
Well, we haven't come up with any questions yet. So yeah, there'll be one more next week to conclude, and then we're putting it out of its misery. No, it's been fun.
To wrap up this semester, I wanted to talk about our favorite educational philosophies, which is important. And I think if you're interested in education at all, and like you don't have to want to become a teacher, but if you want to make YouTube videos or you want to write a book, it's good to learn about these people who have historically been groundbreaking in education. And to start off, the original groundbreaker, Plato himself.
Right.
And I love Plato, big fan of most of his work, but he was kind of like the father of the modern education system to me. He saw education as a means for achieving social and personal justice. So he thought if everyone was equitably educated, all at the exact same level, democracy will work. But if half your population is going to private school, the other half is going to public school, democracy is not going to work because there's such huge disparities. What I do like in education that is kind of different from this is the way that they do it in Germany and a lot of other European countries, it seems, is there's different choices for educational philosophies you can put your kids in, but they're all equally great. Whereas here it's like everywhere is almost equally bad. It's like you can put them in this school or that school, but like
it's not going to matter.
Pick your poison kind of thing.
Yikes.
Yeah, but I liked his thoughts on that. He said, in order for an individual to thrive, they must know themselves, their work, and what is good. And obviously what is good varies a bit depending on the culture of a place. It's you can't just have a theocracy and have everything instructed from a single perspective. But I think allowing kids to kind of discover for themselves what is good and what is just is important in education. Whereas today it's almost like we're afraid to approach any spiritual or any ethical subjects, and everything's just instructed from like a really, really objective point of view.
But I think that kind of dogmatic rationalism imposed by the state, because the state's the ones who teach the ethics in the school, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think Plato envisioned that that level of government influence is itself a kind of moral education, right?
It's true. Yeah, like education is just to create workers technically today.
Exactly.
And I think it should be to create people. A few more things that he postulated was that education should be a lifelong endeavor, which I think will be the case in the Solacene. He also said that play and dialogue were the two main techniques for education. So play at all ages, not just like toddlers. Like everyone should be like really hands-on exploring and playing and discovering things for themselves, and dialogue, which I think is really not the case, but it's crucial. It's like asking questions, having answers. It's how we learn.
Yeah. I'm not so well versed in educational philosophies as Alicia is. She's actually, I don't know if people watching on the YouTube video can notice, referencing an essay that she herself wrote. So I don't know if that's self-plagiarism or whatever, but I don't have that luxury. So I went to my favorite educator, which is Wikipedia, right? He's on the internet and
he's a really good guy.
Just says a lot of great stuff. But no, really, what I did was I thought of the ways that I think the Solacene should teach people to think, like I just mentioned, and then I just tried to find philosophies that enable that.
Cool beans.
And I came up with two, and it's kind of a blend, and it seems kind of funny because I think they're opposed on the surface. So one is called unschooling, and the other one is called classical education.
Yes.
Unschooling is basically the freest form of education. I don't even know if it can be called a philosophy because it seems to me like it's almost the absence of a philosophy. It's very child-led and natural learning, using their curiosity and like homeschooling, but without the schooling, without the curriculum. Yeah, for the most part. Like there are instructors in the forms of parents and supervisors and other adult guides who provide resources and guidance. And there are some kind of more directed nodes of unschooling, I would say. There's one that I thought was interesting called world schooling, which is based around travel. And this is funny to me because when we've always talked in the future about how do we want to raise our kids? Yeah. It sounds like world schooling to me a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
If we, are lucky enough to have the luxury of travel. And another one is called project-based unschooling, which is basically like, we're building a barn, you're helping, like that. I think is really cool. Yeah, I just think that natural state of curiosity being preserved is something that is so hard to do in a standardized classroom, at least one that you're doing for, 40 hours a week. When you're doing it sometimes, I think that's really great. And I think the socialization is really great. I think the structure can be fun. I think that the idea, like I said, of having a canon and something that everyone's reading from, I think a classroom is great in these elements. But in some ways, I think the freedom of barefoot on the grass and just touching the trees can be really, really great. And the other philosophy is classical education, which was very big in like the 1800s. And this is basically all built around the idea of the great books, especially the great books as it was of the Western civilization, the Western canon. And as well as the liberal arts, the natural sciences. And it's kind of based on three phases of development of the individual. The first of which is primary education, which teaches how to learn. Secondary education, which teaches kind of the fundamental various skills and concepts. And the tertiary stage, which is apprenticeship or the preparation to pursue kind of an academic profession. And as well as this, classical education also prioritizes things that we already mentioned, like logic, rhetoric, grammar, history, just those kind of, I guess they're social sciences or liberal arts that aren't really anywhere today. There's no room for computer science here. Sorry.
Okay, that's fair. I think when we're talking about education and philosophy, it's like, as you said, these two things seem like they're completely opposite.
Yeah.
But it's like we're in school, and I think in the Solacene, we'll be in school 12 to 15 years of our lives. I don't think it's a bad thing.
A long time.
So it's like you can have all of these things. You could have a semester of computer science and like get really good at it. Like all of these things can fit in. But right now it's like we're in school for 15 years and nothing fits in. It's just all kind of like...
It's not very well put together.
Yeah, it's all kind of flaky. So some of my other inspos...
I said there's no room for computer science. Like, I think there should be computer science, but I just talk about the spirit of it.
The spirit of it. So some of my other philosophies they're all kind of go together. They all kind of blend into one another. But basically in the mid 1800s, like the early 1900s, there were a bunch of philosophers and psychologists and physicians who were basically revolutionizing the way that we teach. So there's John Piaget and then John Dewey and Marie Montessori. So all of those guys, plus like a bunch of other people at the same time, but kind of all over the world, were saying the way we've been teaching is basically assuming that everyone could be told something and everyone will internalize it the same way. So that's how it was up until these guys were around. And we thought we can give a group of 20 kids a lesson. They all should learn it. If they don't, something wrong with them. But it's like what they said is, no, every single person could have the exact same information. They're going to process it differently because of their experiences and their histories, what they know, how their brains work. So that's called Constructivist Education, which is we're building on people's previous experiences. We're not just lecturing. We need to work together with the kids, basically. And so ever since they were around, education has been heading in that direction all over the world in different ways. Now, the teachers are a lot more conscious of the abilities and histories of their students. And I also think that these philosophers and these people, they really talked about how kids develop by interacting with other kids and with other people. And I think this is something that will be really crucial in the Solacene is intergenerational learning.
Did Piaget ever mention anything like the Labyrinth of Learning? Or
He didn't mention the labyrinth.
Okay.
But he did mention that we all need to just kind of use all 5 senses to learn.
Well, you know what? If they're in the labyrinth,
They're
that's
using all
similar.
the senses.
Because I was thinking the Minotaur could have a big smell.
Okay, a big
so they
smell.
know when he's coming.
Cool. Inspired by the Johns, as I'll refer to them,
Okay.
Marie Montessori.
Yeah.
She
JJM.
created an entire philosophy of education, which is still used today all over the world. It's mainly a primary education, which is 3 to 4 age groups in the classroom, and she really liked, rest in peace, she really liked having really long blocks of time for the kids to have a choice of activities that they can, we're going to choose at the beginning of our block, and then the teacher will facilitate questions, facilitate the learning. They make a choice and they have to commit to it for a really long time. And that is to encourage kids to experience the flow state from a young age. Because right now it's very segmented, the way that we learn, because there's that commonly held statistic of our attention spans are 20 minutes, which is what it was when we were kids. They're probably shorter now.
Yeah.
In theory, that's what they say. They're it's 20 minutes, so you have to change activities every 20 minutes. But in reality, if you keep segmenting our days, we're going to just have shorter and shorter attention spans. So
that's true. The goal should be to lengthen them, not to indulge our shorter ones.
Yeah, and so her 3 tenets are the age groups, open-ended activities. So here's a box of balls, have fun, or here's a bunch of beads, do something with them. You don't have to make a necklace, you can make a skipping rope, you can make a wall hanging, just very open-ended things. But yeah, the teachers as facilitators instead of lecturers. And then my final philosophy, which I live, laugh, love, my favorite thing I've ever come across, which I came across kind of by chance in a course, was Waldorf Education, which is so different and so wildly unique to me compared to everything that I've ever experienced. And it is basically this philosophy which was born out of Rudolf Steiner's, it's not a religion, his philosophy of anthropocene. Is that how it's pronounced?
Don't know.
Anthroposophy. That's basically this thing that he came up with, is that there's a spiritual realm that we all can tap into. But his educational philosophy isn't denominational, it isn't anything like that. But basically the way that the education kind of came out of his philosophy was that you need to nurture the mind, body, and heart of kids. You can't just nurture the mind. You need to do it all, or else they're not going to develop into good people.
It sounds a little bit Greek, as well as the idea of Plato's world of ideal forms that some people can recognize and interact with.
Yeah. So his school philosophy, which is super unique to the school, there's thousands of the schools across the world, but every single one builds their own curriculums, has their own kind of standardization for like the types of people they hire and so on. But it's a very equitable system. It's not like super expensive to get into or anything. A lot of fundraising to allow anyone who wants in. And basically, the kids in the morning will have some pretty like theory-heavy instruction. But then as the day goes on, things get more and more creative. But it's all instructed through a creative lens. So like the science and the math is experiential. So you're going to, here's the stuff, mess around with it, and then reinforce their findings or correct their findings through the text and the literature.
Mm-hmm.
And it really just fosters a connection with like the world. The kids are working on farms, they have gardens, they have plays. All the classrooms are color-coded, which I find fun. There's like a progress of fiber arts and musical instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So in like the primary, they're all playing the recorder, but then by the end, they all can play like the violin or the guitar or whatever. Like
that's something, I mean, that's a good example because there's a parallel to that with our public education here.
Yeah.
We learn the recorder, which is great, like grades 3 and 4.
Yeah.
And then...
Never again.
Yeah.
But they do it, with like a lot of things. It's like, so in kindergarten, the kids are tying knots, but then by the end, they can all crochet or knit a sweater. Like it's all these fun kind of, it's called a spiral curriculum, which I think is really excellent. Like it's all super well planned and, like curated.
It's very well put together. It all fits together like a puzzle.
Yeah, exactly.
It actually makes sense.
Which I think the Solacene will be. It's like, okay, we're teaching the kids this specific type of craft in primary, and they're going to see it again and again and again.
It's like Apple.
Yes.
Whereas right now we've got a little bit of Android.
A little bit Android. Because it's like, you learn the recorder, never touch an instrument again.
And I always think it's funny when you consider the way that we teach young children is a certain way, and there's presumably a reason for that. But then we drop so much of it when we get older. And I was like, why do we do that?
Yeah.
It's obviously good for us because it helped us grow a lot.
Yeah. One other thing that I really like about the Waldorf school is that it's like, okay, this month we're doing science. Instead of like, we're going to sprinkle and water down this science through the whole year. Like, it's like very intense and like in depth on everything. It's like, I feel like it's how we learn. It's like, if you're not making these connections when you're learning them, you're going to forget them and drop them. And then when you're an adult, you're not in the Waldorf school anymore. Okay, I'm going to learn this new recipe. You're going to have a lot of questions unrelated to the recipe. What's the history of this recipe? What's the
ingredients? Where do they come from?
Yeah, how does this chemically work? How does this how is my body going to react to this meal?
Yep.
What should I pair it with? Like, it creates these really comprehensive thinkers, and I really like that.
Well said. Comprehensive thinkers. I like that.
Thanks.
That's who inhabits the Solacene. The Solacites. Comprehensive thinkers. Thank you all for being hopefully comprehensive listeners. And we tried to be comprehensive speakers. See you next week.
Bye.